All right, ladies and gentlemen around the Delaware Valley, welcome to Top Lawyer with Sean Quinn. We've got a fantastic broadcast. We've got a great guest, Amit Shah of Martin Laws on the show. Sean, how are you, sir?
I am well, Joe, and this is our first show that we've done on video, and your camera is not working. So it literally is the best show ever. Because, listen, I mean, the reality is, not everyone has to be subjected to your profile on camera all day. Listen, we got two good-looking guys with myself and Amit, well, at least Amit, that are going to be jumping on the show today. So, listen, while you're figuring out your setup over in the Casa de Doherty over there, we will jump right in. And while you get but I want to take a quick moment to introduce the listeners today to a little bit of what we do on the show. This is the Top Lawyer Show. For years now, we have taken a look at some of the lawyers that maybe you don't see their faces on billboards, maybe you don't see their names in different publications, but they're making an impact every day to the folks across the Delaware Valley. Each month we bring the conversations with different lawyers that we want to profile, and I want to introduce the Delaware Valley to Amit Shah. Amit is a partner over at Martin Law, so you've seen the firm's billboards across Philadelphia and across the state. But Amit has dedicated his entire career to one thing, and that is representing the injured worker in Pennsylvania. But he doesn't just do that. He's not just a workers' comp lawyer. He's one of the few lawyers that is certified by the state of Pennsylvania as a certified specialist in workers' comp law. Now, unlike a lot of awards, you can't just mail in, $500 or $1,000 and get that distinction. No, it's not just for marketing like a lot of awards are these days. It's rigorous, it's credential, and you got to earn it. And Amit's done that. He's also the co-author of the Pennsylvania Bar Institute's Workers' Compensation Practice and Procedure Manual. A lot of folks, including myself, consider that the Bible on workers' comp law in PA. He's chaired, a lot of different CLEs. For those that don't know, those are continuing education programs for lawyers. So he's one of the folks that chairs the PBI's teaching through the workers' compensation section meetings, so that his peers, the people that are doing the same type of work, are learning from him. And he does have some of those other awards too. He's a Pennsylvania super lawyer like me, been like that for many years, and he's also gotten Best Lawyers in America. One of the cool things that we're going to dive in today is he's one of the few guys that's been designated by the NFLPA, the Players Association, to represent professional athletes. He's also done it with NHL, MLB, soccer, and a host of other leagues. So one of the cool things we're going to kind of dive in today. Amit, welcome to the show.
Sean, I appreciate you having me on. After that introduction, I don't know that I want to continue with the show. I feel like this would be the perfect place for us to stop, because it can only go downhill from here. I mean, I don't know that any more could be said.
And honestly, when Joe gets back on the camera, it will go down. So those are there's like death, taxes, and Joe ruining a show. Those are the things that we do every day. Amit, this is our first time actually meeting, but we've been on similar paths for many years. We didn't even know it. We were like ships passing the night back in law school over 20 years ago for both of us.
Yeah.
And we went to the same place and things like that. But I've been working with your firm for years, and this is our first time, so it was a real pleasure for me. In fact, your partner was literally my first show ever that I ever did. So really neat. And listen, he's been singing your praises for years about the work you do. So what was it that drew you to this field, the working with the injured worker, and what was it that spoke to you that you've been doing it your entire career?
So, it's funny. As you indicated, we obviously went to law school together. We were a few years apart, but there was no workers' comp when I was there. It wasn't taught. It wasn't even a topic, a subject that you could pick. Even if it was, I don't think I would have picked it. When I came out of law school, my goal was to be an immigration attorney. And so I connected with a solo practitioner down here who was trying to build his immigration practice. And he brought me on, and I slowly started building the immigration practice. But the bread and butter for his firm was defense, meaning employer, insurance carrier, self-insured, workers' comp. So he was the dark side.
Yeah.
And that's where most of the revenue was generated, and we were slowly bringing up the immigration aspect of it. What ended up happening, though, is he ended up having two attorneys leave who handled workers' comp for him. And so I had to jump in. So one morning I walked into our office because we always had a 7:30 meeting just to make sure everyone knows where everyone's going. And he handed me this giant yellow book and said, "Hey, by the way, I need you to go cover a workers' comp hearing that's going to start in about 45 minutes. Good luck." And that was my entry into workers' comp.
It's amazing because and for a lot of the newer attorneys out there, they don't quite remember those 7:30 meetings. They don't remember, like the baptism by fire approach to we got to it's very different when people are getting into the law these days. I remember those days. I remember walking in and having those meetings, and it's something, that's for sure. And so by accident, you became a workers' comp
accident. It literally, I looked at him and said, "Before I go do this hearing, can you give me a little background as to what workers' comp is so I know what I'm about to go do?" And his words to me were, "Just read the book," which is, I think, 1,000+ pages. And I said, "Well, the hearing is in about 45 minutes. I am not that quick of a reader." And he's like, "Well, you'll figure it out." And unbeknownst to me, I showed up to court. First of all, I didn't even know where I was going because he didn't tell me.
Yeah.
I figured that out. Showed up to court, and turns out that my first hearing was taking an injured worker's testimony, which I had never done. And
hopefully it went better than the first time I did a deposition or things like that, because
you know what? I could tell you it didn't. I'll be honest with you. So claimant's counsel at the time did direct, meaning he asked all the questions first, and then it was time for cross-examination, which is where I would come in and then ask questions of the injured worker. And the judge looked at me and she's like, "Mr. Shah, do you want to cross-examine the witness?" And I, dead-eyed, looked at the judge and said, "I don't know. Do I want to cross-examine the witness?" And she said, "Well," and she was great.
Guys, guys, sorry, live radio, and of course, I'm listening to, your dialogue going back and forth, and kind of laughing. Obviously, sorry to barge in. Sorry, Sean. So I'm having some technical problems here, but I'm getting back on the Zoom. Great to obviously be on air. You hold the fort.
Yeah, we're good, brother.
Sean?
We got it. You can do your thing. We got you railroading my boy with his seminal story to cross-examination.
Well, no, I'm not, because actually, though, I'm not, because it's I'm going to jump in because I've heard a lot of these. I've had conversations with a lot of, not a lot, but, some really good people, attorneys who've never done work comp and tried to dabble in it.
Oh, you don't dabble in this field.
No, you don't.
That a little bit. Yeah. And by the way, so Amit, if you would, please finish that story because it's fantastic.
Yeah. So the judge looked at me and said, "Do you want to cross-examine?" I looked at her and said, "I'm not sure. Do I want to cross-examine?" And she was very, very kind. And she said, "Would it make more sense for you to obtain additional discovery and then defer cross for 30 days?" And again, I'm like, "You know what, Judge? That sounds like a great idea. Why don't we do that?" And that was my first entry into workers' comp.
That is well, one, amazing, and two, good on the judge for not, a lot of judges would not take that approach. A lot of judges would, go after the young lawyer and say, how dare you walk into my courtroom unprepared, and really punish not only the lawyer, but their client in the process. And I love when I see judges, whether it's a trial judge or a workers' comp, doesn't matter, understand, the practical realities of being a young lawyer and being thrown into the fire, so to speak. And you know what? That's great. I love seeing that stuff because there's a lot of judges that are just not. They're not going to work with you.
I know many of them, and I have seen them take young lawyers and just put them through all kinds of things during their first hearings.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, sometimes it's deserved, right?
Absolutely.
Like sometimes 100%. They are 100%. Self-inflicted wounds that deserve, the chastising that comes with it. I always like, if you're going to chastise, do a little teaching in the process, and but some judges won't do that. But we can't name names because then we'll get in trouble. All right. So at what point, so you're doing defense work. You got that extension to do some of the discovery in this case. You eventually do your first defense, trial, testimony, things like that. At what point did you make the decision that, representing the insurers, the employers, the folks on the other side that we are now, that was no longer going to work for you, and that it was time to make a switch to the plaintiff side?
So, as I noted, I wanted to do immigration work, and it was to help people. My family immigrated to the U.S. when I was 9.5 years old. Excuse me. And so the goal was always to help people however I could. The initial plan was to be a doctor. That was always the mindset of, I'm going to be a doctor. And I went into high school, college with the thought process of, I'm going to be a doctor. And then the first time I came across blood and I passed out, I figured, okay, well, being a doctor is definitely not in my future. So now I need to pivot, which is where the law came in.
By the way, same deal. Yeah. I was pre-med at Franklin and Marshall for a year. And not only did school weed me out, queasiness did as well. So hilarious that we both started as pre-medders.
Listen,
go ahead.
I was so sad. I was like, oh, I'm going to be a doctor.
You and me both, man. I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. And then I saw blood for the first time, passed out, and I'm like, I'm no longer going to be a doctor.
That's awesome.
And then I didn't know what I was going to do. And I started talking to counselors, and I spoke with people at Penn State, and eventually started going towards the law track. Enjoyed it. So when I came out and I wanted to help people, I was thrown into this defense workers' comp world really because the options were either, hey, you do defense workers' comp or you don't have a job. And when you come out of law school, at least I had a ton of debt, and I couldn't be in a situation where I could be like, okay, well, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to take whatever job.
You didn't get to just follow your passion.
No, I don't get to just follow and, live my dreams at that point.
Yeah.
I'm back, by the way. My hair didn't look good, guys, and I had to go dress it up. It's an interesting point you make there, and it's one of the things about as injury attorneys that I really admire. I was the job steward as an iron worker, and this is great. And so we work with big steel and all that. Never forget 47th and Lancaster, and we were working. It was a church, and the crane operator picked up the piece, the beam, and instead of bringing it through the, booming up and coming inside the building, he decided to take the piece. And this was first thing in the morning, down up the street where the power lines were. And I happened to be underneath of what we used to call the connectors, and they still call them the connectors. So they yelled down first thing in the morning, hey Joe, can you move? Because I'm like, okay, I'll move. I'm all dug in, bolting up. Next thing you know, you hear pop, 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 pop.
Oh.
My buddy Johnny O'Malley was connecting. He was 52 years old at the time. He was filling in for the day. And you could hear him bouncing off falling down off the deck. He hit the concrete core. It was about 3 floors. And you saw the blood everywhere. Now, He lived, thank God, but he lost his arm, okay? and the hole in his glove was about the size of a quarter, like maybe less. But my point is, one of the things in your worlds that people don't understand, and I'm somewhat fascinated by it, is I knew right then and there I wasn't going to be a doctor, but I was going to be no good at anything where blood, was happening.
Right.
At the same time, Johnny was really kind of jaded him and very painful. What do you guys do? And I'll ask both of you this question. We talk about the law a lot, but how do you prepare when somebody walks in without that arm? When Johnny O'Malley walks into your office, and yeah, you guys are two of the best in your fields, but at the same time, this is an emotional situation you're dealing with, okay? And, there's a call on line 3 has to wait.
Yep.
Sean, I'll go to you, and then, of course, I'll go to Amit, because a lot of times you two are working on these cases, and you want to know. Even when I'm a job steward or an iron worker who's sending a client or a friend to an attorney like yourselves, I want to know there's sensitivity there. And, of course, Sean, talk about that scenario and how you are able to deal with that not only legally, okay, if it's a third-party case, but also emotionally.
Yeah, so there's a couple components to it, right? So when that type of situation, a workplace injury happens, there's in 99% of them, Amit, his firm, they're going to have a case for workers' compensation. If you're hurt on the job in Pennsylvania, you have a workers' comp claim, unless there's some factor, maybe your insurance, the company you're working for doesn't have insurance or whatever it might be, but that's a different animal, different bid. But assuming you're working legally and your company has insurance, you have a workers' comp claim if you're injured on the job. And I'll pass the baton. Amit's going to describe what that looks like in just a moment. But sometimes when you are injured on the job, you have an additional claim, though. And that is a third-party claim, somebody that's outside of the umbrella of your employer. So whether it is a dangerous product, whether it is a multi-employer work site, so a big construction site with multiple contractors, and you're injured due to somebody else's responsibility, then they could potentially have a claim with my office, or where we pursue that claim against that responsible party, manufacturer, whatever it might be. So once we have that kind of lay of the land, I do want to kind of attack how we approach the client and the human-centric approach that we kind of look at it. So after we've done kind of an analysis as to what the universe looks like in terms of claims, make the referrals to a workers' comp lawyer to handle that aspect of it, my approach is how I approach everything in life. I'm going to shoot it straight to the client and be empathetic while doing it. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. I'm going to tell them exactly what they can expect from the law, the claim, the challenges, the layups, and tell them what they can expect from my team, which is compassion, empathy, and ridiculously good customer service. All of those things are kind of the hallmarks of what we do. And while understanding that, the day that they're having today is the first chapter of that story that they're now living. And there are more chapters to come. And there are going to be some really good days and really bad days moving forward. And we know that from experience. We know that from other clients and the work we do. And it's just really important that you shoot it straight with clients, particularly in this market. We are a town and a people that do not like being, lied to about what. Shoot it to me straight, good, bad, or indifferent. And that's the approach we take.
Amit, jump on that, because I know that, first of all, you're one of the nicest guys I know. Okay.
I appreciate that.
Flat out.
It's just a phase that you don't know the real me. That's all.
We don't know the real you.
Right.
I'm going to make some calls. I've heard some things. Don't get me wrong.
They're probably all true.
But talk about that like what Sean said. Talk about that relationship when somebody comes in, especially catastrophic injury, somebody, you know what the amazing thing is, I look at Sean Quinn, I look at Amit Shah, and I know you've been through this situation dozens and dozens of times, okay? And you didn't get where you're at by, not understanding, obviously how to represent somebody, but talk about like what Sean said, dealing with the client at that, in that situation. And at the same time, knowing that, you have a third party attorney that is good, puts that client in good hands as well. That has to be a conscious effort on your half that both of you are, have that bedside manner.
I would echo what Sean said. There's the legal aspect of it, which I hate to say, but from our perspective, like Sean and I have been doing this for a long time. And Sean, as we all know, is a phenomenal attorney. So from a legal perspective, it really is somewhat of the mindset of like, okay, I know what I need to do. I know what I need to file. I know what the investigation is going to be. I know what kind of witnesses I'm going to need. I know what kind of doctors I'm going to need. All those things run through your head pretty quickly. And they happen in an instant. You know what's going to happen. The bigger aspect from what I do, and I'm sure Sean does the same thing, is the human aspect of all this. And you go from being an attorney to being an attorney and a therapist. You go from being an attorney to being an attorney and a counselor. Or sometimes you go from an attorney to just an ear that is there to listen. Because when this individual, like you said, your friend, if he walks into my office or Sean's office and he's missing an arm, I don't think at that specific moment he cares about, well, the statute says this and the law says this. All he's thinking about is 2 days ago, I had both arms and I had a future and maybe I had kids and I had plans and my wife and we were going to do this and we were going to do that. And now I'm sitting in an attorney's office. I'm missing an arm. I'm no longer going to be able to provide for my family the way I was. I'm no longer going to be able to do things with my kids that we had plans on doing. And that's where we come in, where Sean and I would come in, have that conversation and really take the legal part of it out and do our best to let them know, like, listen, what we're here to do is walk you through this process, but we're going to be right next to you. You're not going to be in this alone. You have now an entire team, an entire firm behind you that is going to take care of you and make sure that whatever happens in the future, you're going to be taken care of.
Yeah. I mean, Sean, jump on that because, it couldn't be said any better.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, to some extent, when somebody, they're coming to us for a reason, right? And that is to help them. At the end of the day, they don't know what help looks like. They just know they need it. And they need somebody that's, has experience, kind of knows what they're doing, but also can give them and take some relief off of that emotional load that is weighing down on them. And knowing that we're going to do everything in our power to, right wrongs and level playing fields. And a lot of times clients, will come to me and they ask me, what's my case worth? All those questions. I'm like, there will be a time we answer those questions. Today's not that day. All right. But the key is that we're going to do everything in our power because you deserve nothing less than our best.
Interesting because, amidst the conversation, what hits me immediately is that first discussion, because let's just say theoretically, and it's a work injury, obviously, and you may get the case first. It's what's interesting about that is the things we're not talking about, and that is a lot of times that person will end up in your office and meet because they've been drug around, like everything Sean just said. And we talked about the injury, and like you just said, yes. And I think about Johnny Maui. It's amazing. I can remember it like it was yesterday. And when you talked about the blood and all that, I thought, it hit me immediately. And so, but a lot of times that arm and horrible injury is one thing, but the fact that they've been with the company, for example, in this case, not long because we were out of the union hall, but a lot of times people have been with the company a long time. So they're not only walking into your offices, but with major emotional trauma with the loss of a limb, but also may have been beat up by the fact that they thought that they were going to have loyalty, and emotionally, like you talked about now, they may be in your office now because God forbid that workers' compensation provider stopped their benefits. Okay. And they tried to navigate it if you're in my union, your loyalty's a high priority. In my neighborhood, just like I know you guys, you're loyal and down to earth guys. So why wouldn't you? You've been working for this company for a couple of years, maybe 10 or 20. And so you're expecting, honey, everything's going to be okay. You're talking to your wife or your husband, whatever. And now the emotional, now they're in your office after all that. Talk about that first conversation, and I'll go across the board because Sean, your cases, in other words, they could last a while, and there's some ebbs and flows. Talk about that first conversation in regards to preparing people, for the ebbs and flows of workers' compensation, because we're not just talking about the injury and the therapy. We're talking about preparing them for that journey so that they don't become their own worst enemy. Amit, you talk about that conversation first, and then Sean, you get the call from Amit, and now you got ebbs and flows that might last a year, 2 years, and you want them to be prepared for the long haul amongst the emotional trauma. Amit, if you will.
So those conversations obviously I've had many, many times, and they're very difficult conversations, and especially when the client is in my office and their wife or husband are in my office, and then you have their kids running around in my office, and they're telling me, hey, this happened 2 months ago. I haven't been paid. I'm going through savings. I'm going through everything. I'm going to get paid soon, right? Like everything's going to be taken care of. And it's always that tough conversation where, again, I'm upfront and I tell people, I'm like, I can't guarantee you that. I can't tell you that, yeah, don't worry about it. You're going to get paid immediately. Just sign my paperwork and you're good to go. There are firms and there are attorneys who work that way. I just don't. I give you a realistic timeline. Like, listen, if the insurance carrier is going to fight this, you could be looking at 8 months. You could be looking at a year. You could be looking at a little over a year where you're going to go without any kind of income. So let's start talking about what other options you have while we try to litigate this comp case. And in the meantime, I also give Sean a call and say, hey, listen, there's a third-party component to this gentleman's case that I need you to jump on. But we need to come up with a plan where he or she has something that's going to sustain them for a little while. Because
how do you something is going to change though?
Oh, it's going to.
Because you're going to represent them, and they're going to that getting led around by the nose, and a lot of those things that we know happens. The one thing you can promise them is best representation, that they can that you're going to work hard, but also the experiences. A lot of these people end up at a medical facility that they've never met a doctor like that, or an physician's assistant like they might meet after they get injured. It's not like going to your family doctor.
Right. And it's so, number one, you try to put them as much as you can. You try to put them at ease to say, hey, listen, this is not the first time I'm doing this. I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen this before. And I promise you that you're going to get the best representation that you can possibly get. It's not just me, it's the name behind me, all the people, my team who's amazing. But yeah, I'm going to have to set you up with a specialist because we need you to get treatment. Forget the workers' comp case for a second. Forget the third party case for a second. Just for your livelihood, you need to be set up with a specialist. You're right, like Joe, you can't go to a family doctor and say, hey, the arm's missing. How do I fix this? There's no fix. It's what do we do to try and make it better?
Sean, jump on there because
Yeah, there are actually two things that jump out in this entire kind of sequence. Is one, the nuances of the workers' compensation field. They have all sorts of deadlines, requirements, particularly early on, where things have to be done in sequences and make sure notices go out and claims are open, because there's a lot of folks that get somewhat strung along by their employer, or they try to pay them cash to keep it off of the workers' compensation claims, and they're like, oh, we'll just pay you to sit here, and so there's a lot of things that folks just don't understand, and frankly, even experienced lawyers like myself don't get involved in that world. It's a different world. I don't go for knee surgery and see a podiatrist. If I have a workers' comp claim, I go to a workers' comp lawyer. And while I do work injury cases on the other side, I wouldn't even dare to profess to understand the nuances of the things that have to be filed, the system that they use, the deadlines that they have. They're two different worlds, and it highlights the reason to get to somebody who really knows their craft and really understands the game. Because, listen, could I learn certain things? Probably, but it's not. I'm not going to waste years trying to figure out what Amit could tell me in 5 minutes. That's just not a good use of anyone's time. And then the other side of that is when it does get to us, and it is a matter of you have to deal with it on a human level. And where I was getting to earlier was, clients want their livelihood back. They want to be pain-free. They don't necessarily, listen, aside from the people that are like trying to get hurt and frequent flyers out there, they're typically not injured on a job, but they do exist. But the average worker, the average individual would much rather have never met us. And we know that. They would much rather have worked their lives, done their job, and have as reasonably a pain-free life and supply and support for their families and their kids. Because I don't know about you, but I would much rather throw a baseball with my kid than have a couple dollars from a lawsuit, right? I would much rather be able to walk and be able to do certain things than have a couple extra dollars in my bank account. That's not what this is about. And it's our job to shepherd and really make sure that they understand that there are limits to what we can do, but we are never going to bring that guy's arm back. We are never going to recreate those moments. We might make it easier for them with whatever we recover, but we're not going to change their lives in a way that is going to restore where they were. Something we can't do. So within the confines of what we do, and being a really supportive group of folks, firm, staff, everyone's got to be great and on the same page and communicating the same way. But it works if you're with the right team.
You talk about communications. When I think about all this, Sean, in your world, preparing somebody for it's interesting you bring up people asking about how much a case is worth, and in this, it almost brings up the conversation of the business of law. It does.
Well, and there's disingenuous folks out there marketing and saying, submit your case online for a calculator. They're frauds. Don't talk to those people. If you see one of their ads, get away from them.
Right. And having said that,
I'm almost about to name names, but I won't.
No, I get it, because I saw, this is funny, not funny though. Was on social media, man, action and people. That's why it's important not to. We always talk about dabblers, right? And workers' comp is, and I mean, great PI attorneys have said, and I know you've all heard this, but Sean echoed it. I tried it. I know one guy who's a med mal guy, and he was talking. He was on a show, and he was on another work comp guy. Even though when we talk about work comp guys, the only guy that we know is Amit Shah. That's it. But there is one other guy who's. But my point is, he says to the guy 20 years ago, he dabbled in work comp for a week and a half, and he got the hell out of it because, like Sean said, yeah, you can. Things are changing constantly in that area, and so, making sure that somebody's a specialist in the area, because you have so many of these ridiculous ads out there with the money bags and all that crap. And you sit down and
are they even practicing law where you are practicing, or are they just a referral network?
But Sean, I have a question for you. You have you're dealing with people who have never had an attorney. I had an attorney on a show yesterday who told us a story a while back. A young lady, very very competent attorney, about a woman who had gone to a friend of a friend. And when she walked into this woman's practice, the first thing she asked her was, do I have to pay for the expert again? Okay.
Listen.
And so it to us on this broadcast, having two attorneys that are at the top of the field, you have a
if a lawyer is asking you to front the costs on a workers' comp case or a personal injury case, walk out of that office.
Walk out the building quickly.
And tell everyone never to go to that person, because the way that the system is designed is it's contingent upon us winning, contingent upon us being victorious. That also includes us fronting the expenses, the costs of litigation, the costs of hiring experts, the cost of getting reports, the cost of court reporters, and all the different things that we have to spend money on. You should be never out of pocket to front those expenses. And frankly, if the lawyer loses the case, I think sometimes that happens. Sometimes you don't win every claim, and we eat that. That's the cost of us doing business.
Right.
So the business of law, okay? I often wonder sometimes when you see these late night commercials, okay, and you are in a situation where, like I said before, I'm going through the internet, and this woman, it wasn't even a woman, it was a young girl sitting there talking about how you don't need an attorney, and you can get your money fast, right? And you're sitting there, I don't know if I wrote anything in there. Sure you can. You can get, five. It's like the Kramer thing. You know what I mean?
Those ads are on LinkedIn. I'm not LinkedIn. Maybe they're on Facebook and Instagram constantly.
Right. How do they impact? But how do they impact both of your worlds? Like, in other words, because these people are, who knows? I don't know who they are, but marketers. How do they impact the legitimate, serious injury, injury law field in general? Sean, you must deal with it,
Yeah, we know who these folks are. Yeah,
we do know who these folks are, and I'll give you a perfect example. I spoke with a new client a week to 10 days ago, and the first question out of his mouth was, well, what's my case worth? And I tell him, I'm like, all I know about the case is the information you've given us so far. I need to ask you some additional questions. That's number one, to see if you're going to have a case. Number two, based on our 30, 40-minute conversation, I'm not going to be able to tell you your case is worth X amount of money.
Because you don't know how injured they're going to be in 6 months.
I've never met you. I don't know anything about. I don't have any of your medical records in front of me. Right. And what's interesting is what he said to me was, well, you're the fifth attorney I'm speaking with today. And, I've asked all of these other attorneys the same question, and some of them gave me a number and said, oh, my case is worth X amount of money.
Oh my God.
And my response to him was, I am not one of those attorneys. And even if you don't go with me, and you go with someone else, just make sure it's not one of the attorneys who gave you a number.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be one thing if it was a scheduled loss case, like where somebody lost a pinky and it's worth X amount of weeks. You could probably give them a range in that case.
The specific loss benefits, like loss of an appendage, a knee, ankle, foot, whatever. I can give you a number. I can give you an idea.
Yeah.
But if it's, hey, I have a herniation or a disc herniation,
you got no chance of telling them that. And Frank, and it's the same boat. But what's interesting, Joe, is when you talk about those things being marketed, there are folks with ads. Sometimes they are lawyers directly that are posting them. Sometimes they're acting like there's some third-party agency, and they're like, you can settle your claim without a lawyer. Meanwhile, they're either selling those leads to lawyers through some backdoor Pandora's box, and there are folks. Some of them are our competitors that are buying those leads, that are paying for those leads. They are paying upfront for signed retainers, and it's, frankly, it's shady business. But my blood boils when I see an ad on, one of these meta ads, and folks have these videos and they're like, click here to find out what your case is worth. I'm like, you are a scam artist.
Yep.
And so, a great point and point well made. We have 10 minutes left. Okay. And I apologize. Obviously I had internet issues here, man. One of the things Sean wanted to talk about is representing the professional athletes. Okay. Yeah. Which people don't realize is when somebody gets injured and, in a professional sport, it's a workers' compensation situation. Oh, and by the way, not everybody makes Jalen Hurts money, right? And so.
And what happens if you work for one team in one state and you get hurt in another state?
It's a great point. So talk about that, Amit, because it's a little bit of a different ball game, because the term collective bargaining agreement means a little different. It's a little different when you talk about pro sports than it does when you're talking about a building trades union. And I want to throw in there, are there any third-party cases when it comes to pro sports?
So
big time.
First thing I will clarify is the NFLPA, most of the large unions for most of the sports teams have what we call panel attorneys. So they select certain attorneys who represent their union. So they represent the local team. So in our case, it's the Philadelphia Eagles, the Phillies, the Flyers, in addition to all the minor league hockey teams and so on and so on.
Yes.
And you're right. The difference, though, is we represent the actual players. We don't pay the Eagles a crazy amount of money so that we can use the Eagles symbol in our advertising. That, to me, is almost as if you're representing the Eagles, the employer, not the actual players. But we meet with the players. We'll take the Eagles because it's the easiest example. There are 3 panel attorneys in Philly. It's myself, my partner Joe Hudeman, and then Michael Dryden, who's with a different firm. And we'll meet with the Eagles once, sometimes twice a year. And it's really a quick conversation with the entire team, letting them know, listen, these are your rights under the Workers' Compensation Act. Just because you're a football player, just because you're making an absurd amount of money, doesn't mean that you're not entitled to these rights. For most of the players, we'll deal with the ones who make the good money, the really, really good money. The focus is really just on the medical to ensure that all these injuries that they've suffered, the medical's properly recognized, and if something happens, they're taken care of, even if they end up leaving here and going somewhere else, or even if they end up retiring. But there's also a really large group of players who are practice squad players, or players who tried out for the team and were on the roster for preseason but never made it past that, but suffered the injury during a preseason game. And then somehow, they were rated to be number 3 on the receiver chart or on the depth chart, and somehow they got hurt, and now the Eagles don't need them anymore, and they get cut. And so I have a lot of players like that, meniscus tears, shoulder injuries, ankle injuries, and now they can't sign with another team because they're never going to pass the physical. So those players, they're entitled to both wage loss and medical. The only difference becomes in Pennsylvania, wage loss after a certain amount is capped and how much you can get on a weekly basis. So it's never going to compare to what they were making, but they are entitled to the same benefits that any worker would be entitled to.
Sean?
That was actually going to be one of my questions was, does the wage cap as to what like an average weekly wage payment under the Pennsylvania workers' comp laws apply to these professional athletes? So whereas some folks might be 2/3 of their wages, for these guys, it could be 5%.
It really could. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there third party? Have you ever heard? How does that work?
So most of the third party cases that I have seen, and I'm sure Sean has heard of this, actually revolve around medical malpractice.
Yeah.
They get hurt,
or a products liability claim in the event. I've seen folks where, you have a synthetic turf, for example. And I've heard of claims where I haven't handled these personally, but I knew somebody who worked for one of the big manufacturers of synthetic turf over the years. And one of the claims that they would do is there's certain characteristics of the turf and the turf maintenance that requires, meeting certain levels. And they've sued the turf manufacturers for ACL tears and folks or the turf coming up in certain places either wasn't properly installed. So you do have some that are product centric or relating to either an alleged defective product that are out there. But you're right, most are malpractice issues, although that becomes a little challenging because a lot of times they're team doctors, and then it's a question of outside of your umbrella.
So we all heard of that one case that happened a couple years ago, and here, Sean, I'll ask you this question. I'm going to spit fire now. It was right after the Super Bowl, and Nick Foles was the guest, was the key witness. In your world, in the city of Philadelphia, after the Super Bowl win, if there was one human being alive,
right,
you could have for a witness, he'd have to be right at the top of that list.
Yeah, it's true. The other case too that I'm thinking of is, if you remember the Washington game a few years ago, that railing collapsed.
Oh yeah.
And as Jalen was walking through. Now,
that's right.
Jalen didn't get hit. He helped the little kid or the person that was there, but change that scenario. And now Jalen gets crushed by this rail. Obviously, there's no Super Bowl after that. But put that aside. If he gets injured because of either a negligently installed rail or something like that, there's a possible third-party case that he could have against the folks that either did the installation, the product failed, things like that.
Amit, do the pro athletes go through some of the same issues that regular workers have with the work comp providers and stuff like that?
To an extent, only because you have to remember with the pro athletes, their lifespan, their career span is short. So if you're on a team and you have a contract or you're on a contract year, then the mind starts turning that, like, if I go down this path of a workers' comp or file a claim and I'm on my contract year, what's going to happen? You're not going to get that your final big contract. So sometimes they just hold it in, deal with the pain, take the medication, get the injections, and just leave things alone because they're trying to move on and get that big contract.
Sean, I know we only have a couple minutes left.
Yeah, what I wanted to do, Joe, is give an opportunity to, one, thanks, Amit, for coming on our show today. How can folks, if they have a workers' comp claim or they just want to consult with you about a work injury case or frankly, other lawyers that might want to refer a workers' comp, how can they get up with you?
So, Sean, obviously, thank you to you and Joe for having me on. I mean, it means the world to me, and I do appreciate it. Best way to get into contact with me would be either my email, that's ashah@paworkinjury.com, or you could reach me at 215-587-8400.
Awesome. And,
Sean?
And we will say go Phils at the end. Don't worry, Joe. So, you can hit us up at quinnlawyers.com. You get us on all the socials. You want to shoot me an email directly at sean@quinnlawyers.com. And you'll find us on the interwebs of Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn. But listen, what do we got? A minute or two? What's our over under on Phillies this year? Number of wins. Joe, since you get to always ask the question first, what's your number, buddy?
My number is 85.
Stop. We're better than the 85.
I hope, it's the injury factor I worry. And, I wish we would have brought back Harrison Bader and Garcia.
Right. Garcia. You're off the show. Amit, what do you got?
I was more in the 90s. I was somewhere like 92, 93.
Yeah, I got a 94 win. We're going for it, boys. Let's go.
Go, Phil.
Guys, by the way, I want to mention to our listeners, it's the contingency fee agreement. These fantastic attorneys, if you're concerned that you can't afford them, you don't have to be. These are outstanding attorneys. There's no out-of-pocket cost. It's so important. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to Top Lawyer with Sean Quinn. Of course, we want to thank Amit Shah of Martin Law for being a phenomenal guest. On behalf of our host, Sean Quinn of the Quinn Law Group, I'm Joe Doherty. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Go Phils.
Go Phils.